the BBC has found evidence that Russian troops have been forced to pull back from some positions held since the start of the war. But civilians are once again paying a terrible price. Just outside the capital Kyiv, on a stretch of the E40 highway, is where shocking images from the early days of the war emerged. They showed Russian troops firing on civilians trying to escape. Jeremy Bowen has now reached the scene of the attack and found evidence that war crimes may have been committed. It is important to bear witness to this, to the barbarity of the war, and so some viewers may find his report graphic as well as distressing.
On a stretch of road that runs between two villages with names that translate as Dream and Sweetheart is all the savagery and waste of war. Ukrainian forces had just recaptured it, their troops moving in after a heavy bombardment from their artillery. This was only a few hours after the Russian retreat.
Early hours of this morning, this was recaptured.
Absolutely correct. So basically, around 2 a.m. today, our reconnaissance team report that they start to see movement.
Alexander Radzikovsky, a Ukrainian volunteer who's back home from England to fight, showed a position where a Russian tank had been dug in.
So that's where the Russian tank was, and that's exactly where this is the line of fire. That's how they shoot.
On the 7th of March, Alexander's drone unit filmed the tank in action. The drone showed civilians trying to get to Kyiv to escape the Russians. And then they saw the tank. One of the cars was forced to stop. The driver tried to show he was harmless, and the Russians shot him dead. They also killed his wife. The dead couple were Maxim Yovanko and his wife Ksenia. They were traveling with their 6-year-old son and a friend who both survived. She said Maxim had been shouting they were with a child when he was killed. Almost 4 weeks later, Maxim's badly burnt body lies next to the hulk of their car. His wedding ring is still on his finger. Ksenia's remains are inside. Her mouth is open, as if in a scream. The car and the back seat are riddled with bullets. The vehicle and their bodies were not burnt when they were killed. The hypothesis is that Russian soldiers tried to destroy the evidence of what they'd done. The drone operator who filmed their death says the Russians must have known Maxim's car was not a threat.
So they were trying to say that they were civilians?
Yes, they know it. You can see all car is civilians, no army car, and they shoot it.
In the woods near the road, there's evidence the Russians left in a hurry.
You can see the place where, in the trees, the Russians were living. There's a dugout, there's beer bottles. It's like the Marie Celeste, half-finished meals.
Actually opened.
They were here for a month. The camp is full of the soldiers' rubbish. On a front line, that is usually the sign of an ill-disciplined unit. They tried unsuccessfully to hide another tank in the trees. That was punished by the Ukrainians who destroyed it. A much bigger question is whether there will be a reckoning for what happened on the highway. Maxim and Ksenia were not the only ones who were killed near the tank dug into the roadside.
There are more bodies here.
Yes.
1, 2, 3 bodies, I think.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
In a couple of hundred yards with Alexander from the Ukrainian army, we counted 11 other dead bodies.
It's Ukrainian.
3 were wearing recognizable Ukrainian military uniform. The others wore civilian clothes.
This is Ukrainian pixel.
Some of the dead were piled up and surrounded by tires.
They deliberately burned them. They set on fire to hide what they did.
In the desolation are a mass of questions about who they were and how they were killed.
It's hard to imagine the fear these people must have gone through in the last few moments of their lives, or indeed of the anguish survivors, families must be feeling now. But this is more than just a collection of terrible deaths. It's a crime scene. because under the laws of war, civilians are supposed to be protected.
We drove to the next village to confirm a Ukrainian claim that they'd destroyed more Russian tanks. The Russian armor was broken, and except for soldiers, the village was deserted and still. The Russians could be redeploying to the eastern battlefields, but just a few hours after they'd left this strategic area close to the capital, it was clear they were being forced out. Many civilians are mourning relatives and friends they say were killed by Russian troops. As and when they retreat, they might leave behind more evidence that could add up to war crimes. Jeremy Bone, BBC News, outside Kyiv.
Well, just a few miles from the E40 highway where Jeremy was reporting lies the town of Irpin, 13 miles from the capital and also the scene of recent heavy fighting and terrible damage as Russian forces tried to encircle Kyiv. Now the Ukrainians say it's been liberated. And our international correspondent Orla Gearin has been there with Ukrainian troops. Again, you may find some of her reporting upsetting.
Under foreboding skies, we enter the town of Irpin. It now stands as a testament to Ukrainian resilience and Russian defeat. We travelled under armed escort, a tense journey along a carefully chosen route. We were warned Russian forces might still be in the forests on the outskirts. They occupied about a fifth of Irpin and have left their mark. But Ukrainian troops have driven them out and reclaimed the ruins. The damage here gives a sense of how fierce the fighting has been. This was a key battleground, and Ukraine's victory here was critical. If the Russians had been able to push through here, they would have been on the way to Kyiv. The capital is just a short drive down the road. Where is the child who cherished this toy? And where are the families who were shelled day and night? Most had to flee, but Irpin withstood the assault and has been given the honorary title Hero City of Ukraine. The troops here are savouring their victory, but know the enemy may be back. They need Kyiv, says Serhiy, because Putin will lose if he doesn't take Kyiv. So perhaps they will try, but we are prepared in case they come back. His day job is TV presenting. Just up the road in tree-lined suburbia, a powerful message to the Russian leader. His losses are mounting here. His original battle plan has failed. Well, you can see here what happened to this Russian tank. It's been ripped to shreds. This is an example of the defeat that was inflicted on the Russians, and they are gone for now. But in the future, they may try to regroup and make another push for the capital. Now Irpin can begin to recover its dead, to reclaim bodies from the rubble. There could be no proper burials under shelling. The mayor says up to 300 civilians were killed here. As supplies are going in, bodies are coming out. Some were targeted even as they tried to flee. Today, another trickle of civilians making the difficult journey out. Troops carrying what they could not leave behind, their much-loved pets. All here are scarred, those who stayed and those who fought. How do you feel about the Russians who did this?
No obscenities?
No.
I hate them. I hate them with from the depth of my heart. I used to treat them normally. I had friends from Russia. I don't believe I have them anymore. There are no excuses for this.
An ambulance waits for a frail survivor of a merciless and failed Russian attack. And Ukrainian soldiers leave the battlefield with the swagger of victory. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Irpin.
Let's talk now to Jeremy Bowen, who's back in Kyiv. Jeremy, your reporting of wars, it goes back to El Salvador, I think, in the 1980s. And I just wonder, have you seen anything before, like the images you've witnessed in this conflict?
Yeah, Clive, sadly I have. Wars are savage, wars are dirty, very often dirty, and terrible things happen. That's why there is international humanitarian law, which is meant to regulate the way that armies behave in wartime. Now, it's often broken. And I've seen the Russian army breaking it in Grozny in the 1990s, in Syria since 2015, and here in the last month or so. Now, what can we conclude from this? Well, a lot of armies do break international humanitarian law and often commit war crimes, but sometimes it's maybe a rogue unit or individuals. In other cases, it's systemic. And looking at the pattern of behavior, I'd say with the Russians, it is systemic. It comes from the top. And if we look at what's been happening here around the capital in the last few days, pushing back, certainly it's a significant victory for the Ukrainians. But this war, I fear to say, is still in its relatively early phases. So there will be more trouble ahead, and there may be more trouble here in the capital as well. No one has won, no one has lost yet. But I think that looking ahead, civilians in this country are still going to have to brace themselves for bad times.
OK, many thanks, Jeremy, to you and your team. Jeremy Bowen there, live in Kyiv.